music lovers, and welcome to another episode of the Woodshed. This week, we've got one of my favorite dudes, favorite players, best singer, possibly one of the best looking guitar
Oh, dude.
players in the game. Stop. No. Ariel Posen, thank you for joining us in the Woodshed.
Dude, how are you?
Very, very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. You're looking good in these weird times. Looking better than ever.
Strange times indeed. So, for our lovely woodshedsmen out there, I like to always just give a little rundown on how our musical paths crossed. Right?
Yeah.
And I think you had come across my radar. Originally, I had done a clinic in Toronto for Sir, and Joey Landreth was there. And Joey was like, dude, you gotta hear my buddy. You gotta hear my buddy. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. I respect his playing. I'd love to get him on one in the future. And when he was talking about you, I immediately, like, after the clinic that day, after the hangs, it was Travis at the time, Travis was working at
Yeah.
and we were all hanging up there, and I went back to the hotel, and so they both started just sending me links of you just ripping. And it wrecked me. Since then, we've become good friends. We've had our first, I think our first in-person hang was at NAMM. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think what was it, now 16 or 17 or it was just one of those, hey, you know Andy? No, I guess I do now. Grab a guitar. Okay. Hey, you guys just play. Okay. What do you want to play? I don't know.
And
This? Okay.
off we
The rest is history.
yeah, and off we went. Since then, man, you've had a busy couple of years. You've released several musical projects, some European tours, various tours through Canada. Man, can you just before we dig into our nerdisms, give our viewers kind of your quick discography on past couple of years, all the things that you've released and what you've got out, and where they can get it so they can hear you.
Well, basically anything under the sun that I've done is available, or at least information at arielposen.com. You know, links to my music is available everywhere to steal, stream, buy, all those places, and all links are there. A year, I've been at this solo thing officially since I want to say the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. No, what am I saying? Middle of 2017. First record came out, how long? January of last year. So that's been out a year and a half now. I think it's actually, yesterday was the year and a half birthday, now that I'm looking at the date on my computer. Doesn't matter. That's been out. I did a couple other live records with primarily those same songs, and
Which are killer. I mean, I've absolutely enjoyed all of your outings that you've been putting out. People on the other side of the glass may not really realize how good of a singer you are, man. This year, before things went haywire, we had the Elements of Sound, which you joined us on, and it was excellent.
Thank you for having me. That was so much fun. What a great way to what a great way to kick off something like NAMM. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. That was a special night for sure. I remember joking. I said something like, "Well, thanks you all. Like, thanks for coming, everybody. You realize this is the one chance of a pre-NAMM hang before we all get sick. Little did I know what was really coming, right?"
Yeah.
Exactly. No, but yeah, no, that's I've put out those records since I started a new record. It's actually basically done. I've been touring. I was lucky because I got all my touring that I had planned out of the way right up until March 7th. I feel like shit hit the fan March 13th. I got all my dates. I was in the UK. I was in Sweden.
You know, the specific date. You're like, March 13th at 4 p.m. is when shit hit the fan.
Well, it was just like, I don't know. To me, it was like one of those things. Like, where were you on the day that? I mean, 9/11 is something horrible, but like that to me, it's like it's a landmark date. To me, March 13th, it was like everything got shut down. They were announcing everything, you know.
Yeah. Were you in Scotland or Ireland or somewhere like that when it shut down, or were you back in Canada or where?
Yeah, it was actually kind of nutty. I was in Ireland. I had just gotten there the day before, and the month prior to that, I was cross country 2 separate times. On my way both times, like people started, I was seeing a lot more masks. I was seeing a lot more caution to the wind, but not that much. And yeah, I got there the next day, all the announcements, and a week later, I was back in
Yeah.
Canada. Got out of there. Yeah,
I think Phil X, who was also on the Elements gig with us,
yeah.
he had a very similar scenario. Like he flew over to start some European dates, and like immediately just turned around, and come back home.
Oh man, I'm so fortunate that I didn't have any tour dates. I was going to take March and April and some of May off anyways. I wasn't going to start up with touring again till end of May.
Yeah.
Obviously, everything got canceled after that, but those first couple months, I wasn't in the middle of a tour. So many friends of mine, were in the middle of a run,
I
or
was
just
getting
like,
ready to go. I was getting ready to go back out. We had a busy year on my end to go back out. But it's been crazy, and so that leads us to things like this, right? Where you're just trying
yeah,
to like get creative, provide, you know, not only a hang for all of our people that are in the guitar community that love guitar and stuff like that, but also for ourselves, man. I do the Woodshed stuff just as much to keep myself sane as
100%, man.
as
Yep.
anything else. And with that said, I'd love to just dive in to some guitar nerdisms. One of the things that sticks out about your playing that I absolutely love is the various extremely low tunings that you use, mixed in with, if I'm not mistaken, you're a pinky slide guy, right?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And a lot of this chord voicing stuff that you happen behind the slide as a chronological kind of thing, you know, what was the first kind of record that you were like, I'm going to play guitar, right, and start up the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Then what was the moment that, if there was one specifically, that you had started really carving your own voice because you're a fabulous, what I consider standard, regular, normal player, right?
Yeah.
And then you can do all this slide stuff too. When what were those two moments like that I really like when I look at a timeline of a player's life? You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
this is where I started, and then this is where this was the thing that really made me start grabbing my own voice. And what is it that you look for even today when you pick up the guitar and practice to continue to find your own thing? You know what I mean? Like kind of
Yeah.
tell us by that.
Well, I think it's there was 3 different times. So obviously when I first started playing guitar and I started becoming attracted to the idea of guitar, it was the mid 90s. I was a mid 90s kid, and it wasn't guitar players. It was like, I was brought up on the Beatles, and at that time it was like Dookie, Green Day, Nirvana, Chili Peppers, Rage Against the Machine, all these other like guitar. There weren't really, it's not guitar music. It was just bands, and I loved guitar as part of an ensemble. So like I just wanted to, sorry, my tuners, I was going to play When I Come Around, and I screwed it up. Yes, I did. But yeah, it was just guitar in songs. It was really speaking to me. I thought it was so cool. I loved it. Everyone in my school was playing guitar. And then 2 months later, everyone quit, and I was the only one still playing. But I never,
That era of bands, dude. This same
yeah,
thing. I mean, like when that era was happening, MTV. It was before the Kardashianification of.
it was when they were still playing music, and
There
music was actually,
festivals on. I remember the MTV Spring Break and all that stuff would just be concert stages, right? And it
yeah,
would just be, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, like you said, Chili Peppers, like
Soundgarden, all these other, yeah,
all through, all different genres. And it's weird because at that time, if I'm not mistaken, that would have been like when the One Hot Minute Chili Peppers Navarro era was
exactly, yeah,
thing,
exactly, yeah,
that kind of era. And I remember seeing these are all the Lollapalooza bands. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
all of that thing. And like you said, it's ironic because we talk about how those weren't guitar bands, but by today's pop standards, oh, they're
yeah.
huge. They're
Huge, yeah,
big time guitar bands.
big time guitar
It's
band.
just like the perspective of like there's not a lot of actual guitar in today's top 40 versus then top 40. It was like there may not have been a guitar solo, but there was. I mean, it was
It was
riffs.
guitar-driven music.
Yeah, it was riff central
It
for
was
sure.
riffs and big sounds and big it was just huge chords, like power chords, just sounded so satisfying to me. My first real amp that I bought was a Mesa Boogie single rectifier.
Yeah.
Amp I would never consider, nothing wrong with it. It's just not my style. Like now that I have a thing and know what my sound is, looking back, it's not at all. But it was because of growing up on all this kind of music where it was just, I want a 412, I want a rectifier or like whatever, a Marshall type of amp like that. And I just want to play huge ass power chords.
Yes. Dude.
That was my upbringing. And the whole other side was the Beatles too. So Beatles was like, complete song service.
Was that like a parent thing that got you into the Beatles? Was it a friend or a brother or a sister?
Parents, yeah. Both my parents are musicians, and they had a heavy influence on us with the music we were listening to. And they grew up on the Beatles, but at the same time as all those bands were doing their thing, in 94, 95, the Beatles anthology had come out.
Yeah.
So it was like this huge revisit into the catalog itself, the history of the band. So it was like an excuse to learn about it. And then they had all these B-sides and different versions of songs. We just got obsessed with it. It just really spoke to us. We loved it. We were kind of told, like, it's not that we were told, but we just believed in our own head, I'm talking about my brother and I. The Beatles was like the perfect example of music. And everything else stems from it. That was just, and maybe that's not true, but that's just how I perceive it. That's how I look up to them.
A lot of people that perceive it that way.
Yeah. So that was huge. But I didn't get into, like guitar players, Hendrix, Clapton, Stevie Ray, until I was like 16.
Which is still early. I mean, that's
still early, but
I started playing electric guitar until I was 18. It's like, so.
Oh, screw you.
I was grassing, dude. I was just grassing as hard as I could grass.
But yeah.
Yeah, so like at 16, you started down the path, and it sounds like they were blues rock guys. They were Stevie Ray's. Is that true or is that not true? Yeah. So,
yeah, I was never into like any shred guys. Like Steve Vai, Satriani, guys like that. I just never got into it.
Yeah.
Eric Johnson, love. But it was Stevie Ray Vaughan. It was Hendrix. It was that kind of camp. And, at that point I had been playing for almost 10 years or 8 or 9 years. I was kind of obviously just getting sick. My tastes were evolving and I wasn't able to really do what I was hearing or what I was listening to. So I had that moment there where it was like, you know what, I need to step it up. I suddenly just started getting inspired by these players and I just dug in. Hit the shed, so to speak, and I put in those 10,000 hours. I started listening, and then I got into jazz, and I got into all these players like Schofield, Metheny, Joe Pass, Weston Montgomery. I got into that whole thing, and that helped shape all these other elements, just to my musical understanding. But yeah, Stevie Ray Vaughan, I keep coming back to him. He was huge. Jimmy Vaughan. There was a lot of blues guys. And that took, so that kind of...
That's still heavy in your playing now. Like when I hear you play a blues lick with that authenticity, right? Like that's one of the things is like blues style licks, blues licks are in so many rock guys' vocabulary, but that seasoning, that authenticity only comes like, I hear it in your playing, when you go for one of those Stevie Ray style of bends or things,
yeah.
And I can tell that's there. So you've hit that kind of era. You said you got into some jazz, which if people don't know, you have a huge, great, expansive grasp on harmony and chord voicings and multiple parts at the same time. You do really well. That stuff sounds so beautiful when you play.
Thank you, man.
When did the slide happen? And was it a Dwayne? When was it Derek? Like, when did the slide happen? Where did that come from?
Yeah, the slide, first of all, as a working musician, I started becoming a sideman when I was 18, basically. So you start doing gigs, you're playing other people's music, and sometimes you got to put a slide on. And for the longest time, it was a novelty. It was a thing. Oh, this song has a slide. I better get my one slide I have and just try to do the thing, never thinking about it. But in time, I found myself just not thinking about it, but doing more of it on gigs. So I just got a comfortable grasp of it the technical side of it a bit more. And people would always say like, that's nice slide stuff. And I was like, oh, really? I don't, okay. Fast forward a bit further, I saw Derek live, moved me to tears, but it didn't, the thing about Derek, you know, he is so amazing, but when I heard him, it didn't inspire, it inspired me obviously, but it didn't inspire me in the way of like, I want to do that. I want to sound like that. To me, it was like, no one's going to ever sound like that. Derek is Derek. Like just how lyrical he sounds, how musical everything that he played, and how the purpose was there that everything he played. That's the stuff that stuck with me. But it wasn't until I heard this guy, this Canadian guy named Kevin Bright, who's arguably one of my favorite guitar players. He's a dude from Toronto, and he's had a long career as a session musician. He's played with Norah Jones, Katie Lang, Cassandra Wilson, all these other people. And he's had a bunch of his own bands. And he plays mando, banjo, dobro, and slide. And the slide, something about his slide playing, when I first started listening to it, it affected me differently than the Derek thing. It was, I hate the word organic, but it had this very organic, different thing. And the way it spoke to me, you know, I was hearing more chordal stuff. I was hearing more droney stuff. And that's when I first started messing with open tuning.
Okay.
I heard him and I was like, okay, I got to learn open E. That made me be like, okay, that's it. I want to, you know, I don't want to sound like him, but I definitely am inspired by him, and I need to understand what he's doing by doing it in the tuning that clearly he's doing it in. So I devoted a guitar to open E, and I started taking it to all my gigs, whether it was a good idea or not. That's the way that it helped me really get a grasp on the fretboard in a new tuning. Trial by fire, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And it helped in time. Again, as you know better than anyone, the answer to everything, yeah, everyone might have a touch of talent, but it's time and work. That's what really goes into it. And I spent all the time in this new tuning. And eventually when I got my head wrapped around it, I started transposing. So, okay, open E is the same as open D, is the same as open D flat. It's the same as open C, same as open whatever. I just focused on 1-5-1-3-5-1, which is like,
essentially you're just moving the capo, like the
yeah,
tune as the capo. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's a way to think of it. I'm fortunate to have a couple more guitars now that I can keep in different tunings where you don't have to capo as much. But the lower you tune down, first of all, it does sound big and nice, and it's hard to get away from that when you get used to it. But if you're only playing an open E and you want to play in C, you're not going to capo the 8th fret. You know, like you may as well have all that real estate down there. And then when you want to play an open E, you capo on the 4th fret. But that wasn't actually the things that was going through my mind at first. In fact, I would still listen to people like Kevin, and I'd hear them, and clearly it was open C or open D flat. And I was like, how is that happening? I don't understand it. Because whenever I tune down, my strings are buzzing, the slide, like nothing is working. I never thought about how much the guitar needs to be set up to work with that. And I would be doing sessions for people, roots, like kind of country sessions, and we wanted to do like a low C thing. And I was just like, I think if I just tune like drop C, and like the idea was there, but I never really figured it out until when I was playing in the Brothers Landreth, we were doing a lot of stuff in open tuning and standard tuning. And I started understanding, oh, okay, so if you're in open tunings, you know, it's more about matching the tension of the strings. So if you're playing 11s in E, maybe go to 13s in D or 14 in D. And then if you're going to go to C, maybe go to 17 or 18, like just match the tension. And then I was like, now I get it. It's stuff works for slide and low tunings when you properly set the guitar up for it. Because like any other style of music, you just play it, right? Slide, it's imperative to have that right action, to have the right string gauge, and most importantly, to have a right slide. That took me a long time too, because just like anybody else, you grab one off the shelf at Guitar Center or Long McQuaid, if there's any Canadians watching, and you think it's the one, you take it, and it's 3 times the size of your finger, and you're like, wow, I guess I'm not cut out for this. This is really hard. And then you never play it.
On that note, let's take just a few seconds here. Let's talk about your favorite string gauge for open E, right?
Yeah.
Your favorite tuning, like for the low stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, you got kind of like a Ry Cooder looking guitar in your lap right now. I don't know this. It doesn't have the big thing over it, but it's
no Supro pickup. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's vaguely in the flavoring. Will you talk about 3 things here? That slide thing on your finger, the size that you recommend for someone who's just getting into it, right? Because like I like to make stuff for the woodshed where beginners or maybe people that have not played slide or whatever, everybody gets something, right? So and then let's talk about the action of your guitars, because it's really important. You're not a guy that doesn't I mean, like you have the slide on, but you're also playing. So you're more finite. There's got to be a balance there versus just jacking the strings up.
Exactly.
To a level.
So
let's through your setup, and
let's start
amp and pedal too.
Okay. Well, let's start with the action. The thing about the action, I do play in a variation of tuning. So, I play in standard tuning. This guitar is in B standard, which is standard tuning down a 4th. So it's like a baritone.
Is there anything different with the scale length of that guitar?
Nope. This is 25.5, like normal Strat.
Gotcha.
If I'm playing open E, open D, open C, now the action is always the same on all my guitars. I don't know the exact measurements. It's all based on feel.
Would you kind of like maybe say, like with your fingers, is it like, or just hold the guitar up to a point maybe? Yeah, that'll work. Hey,
I mean, it's like,
yeah, bring that in. Let's take a look at that. Run that down a little bit to the left.
I got the mic in the way.
Yeah, that's good right there. That's perfect. That is a perfect setup. Cool.
I mean, I get asked, maybe 10 times a day about this. So it's clear to me now the answer. I don't have an exact measurement, but I tell everybody to base it on what works for you in terms of the feel. I need to find that right height, and the guys that set up my guitars, bless them, they now know that there's a default. If you're setting up a guitar, there's kind of your stock height that everyone likes. People normally like a lower action. It's faster. It's more comfortable to play. For slide, you want to go a little higher, but for me, it's just a little higher than that, and I don't know how to explain it other than I have to play it, and then we got there. So no matter what string gauge, what tuning, my action is always the same so that I can comfortably put a slide on, play, not feel like I'm buzzing out or fretting out, and I can play comfortably without a slide, bend, all that stuff. So that's important. String gauge, for standard tuning, I always base it off of that. It really depends on the guitar. I don't know if you change it up depending on the guitar, but I find some guitars, I don't go lower than 11s. I like to go 11 to 54 heavy bottoms as a standard. So, some guitars like 12s. On tellies, for some reason, I'm not a huge telly guy, but on tellies, I like 12s. I don't know why. Strats, 11s, Les Pauls, which I'm not a big Les Paul guy either, but like 335s. If you're in standard tuning, you cannot go lower than 11s, or else they just don't sound right. They don't come alive the way they're supposed to, So based on that, if I was going to go open E, suddenly you have to think about it. So you're tuning your A string up to a B, you're tuning your D string up to an E, and you're tuning your G to a G sharp. So it's already getting a bit tighter. You don't necessarily have to go to a higher gauge. You can, but you don't have to, because there's already more tension or less tension. For D, to me, it's just doing the math. I personally would like to go a couple steps up just so that in D, it feels like I'm in E.
Sure. Yep.
So
it's like as being a hired gun session guy, that's the same thing that I use when I move guitars around for drop tunings, whatever. Same thing. You know, it's like if I'm 10s in standard, I use 11s for the next step down, 12s after that. And just keep moving it down. I now for me, I like to go about roughly 1 gauge heavier on Gibson scale length.
Yeah.
So
I
either
think that's
the
the
335 or a Tom Anderson Cobra. If you've ever played the Cobras, they're like the small. If I'm using 10s in standard, I use 11s. I actually got to a point where I was chasing tone, and I know somebody's going to say this in the comments, so I'm just going to interject. I was chasing tone so long, being a Brent Mason worshiper. I played 11s most of my life, and I actually worked myself down to 9s on telly
huh.
because I like that tone,
Yeah.
that wiriness. I was chasing it in treble and EQ, and at the end of the day, there's something about the way a string this big moving this much.
There's a sound to it.
It's
There's
a sound, right? And it's
yeah.
like people that are chasing the Van Halen tone with heavy strings or the Angus tone with heavy strings. It's never going to happen. Like part of their thing fundamentally is a light string tuned down that's wiggling a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So I love that different aspect, and I'm an oddball because I love 13s on Martins because I'm a bluegrass kid. You know what I mean? So like,
Dude, yeah, you got it.
It's what are you chasing? You know what I mean? And with that said, man, can you give us a quick rundown of your favorite style of guitars you're playing currently? Your favorite amps and pedals?
Yeah. Well, I want to interject. I want to say that about just about string gauge in general. I have never given a shit about string gauge. The only person I was even aware of any relation to string gauge was Stevie Ray Vaughan, the 13s, and
because it was so mythos, you know.
Because it was so mythos, and I tried it, and I was like, you know, I could never do that. So it was never something that when I was younger, I was like, that's the answer. I mean, a lot of people try to do Stevie, and it's so much of a part of it is bigger strings resonating like that, sounding bigger with headroom and a loud amp. It just gives you, that's where that body comes from. And I like body, and I like a fight. I play I tend to play hard,
especially
with my fretting hand.
Yeah.
So, you know, if strings are too light, in fact, I hate playing guitars at NAMM. I always usually bring a guitar because I play out of tune. I'm over bending. There's no right or wrong. It's just what I'm used to.
For sure.
I need a bit more of a fight. And I was going to say,
that's really for our viewers. Our viewers need to understand the value of that, right? Josh Smith has a different guitar from Andy Timmons, has a different guitar from you, has a different guitar from and down the line, and everybody's finding the thing that works for them, and that's really, really important. It's great to look around, and take an inventory of what's available, but you have to internalize if it feels good or not. You know, that has to come inside.
And that's the path to finding your own voice. Everyone's always asked me, how do I find my own voice? What are the steps? It's like the first thing you need to do is not worrying about comparing to other people. Just because someone else does something doesn't mean that's going to work for you. We're all different, and there's only one of you. There's only one Andy Wood. You have to focus in on what makes you that player and what's natural. And you know, it's a beautiful thing when you realize it, because you just start moving forward in this other path that is different than, oh, well, I better do, if these people do that, then I better go that way. And if these, you know, you're just like, oh no, it's just me. I'm on my own path. Yeah. I also wanted to say, just because you were talking about bluegrass stuff, like 10 years ago, another huge part of my journey of playing guitar, I was playing the Savannah Music Festival with a dear friend of mine who I used to play guitar for her for years. And we were playing, and we shared the bill with Sarah Jaros. Are you familiar with her?
Oh, incredible.
She's amazing.
Incredible.
And more importantly, we had lunch. Not more importantly, but what I'm leading to is that we had lunch one day, and the organizer of the festival, beautiful house on a river somewhere in Savannah or just outside of Savannah, had a few select artists over. So they had myself, just because I was in the band with Sierra, the girl I was playing with, Sarah and her band, Mike Marshall, his wife, and Chris Thiele. So we were all having lunch together, and I was aware of Thiele, but I didn't really, I never really dug into his music. You know, my parents played folk music. I grew up going to folk festivals and being around this kind of music, but I never listened to it or got into it. And they started rehearsing for a segment in one of their shows. They were all going to play "The Tourist" by Radiohead, and they were all just playing in the. I'm watching Mike, Chris, Sarah, and Katerina is Mike's wife's name.
I think
She's a heavy mandolinist too.
yeah, for sure.
Anyways, my mouth is like on the floor, and it's funny how life happens because you meet someone or you see them, and they were all really nice. But like a couple of months later, we just went to Bonnaroo, my wife and I. We were married at the time, but Punch Brothers were playing, and I was like, maybe I should go watch this set, and it just obviously blew me away.
Yeah, it's
why wouldn't it?
Like, well, yeah, to see those guys. For those viewers that haven't seen the Punch Brothers or looked them up, please do. It is the only word I can say is like every time I've seen them, it's just daunting. Like you're just like, it's inspiring, it's beautiful, it's soft, but
it's
like
a ride.
Ferocity is just unbelievable.
And you know, all those guys come from a bluegrass background, and I've gotten to know a couple of them. Like I've met Chris, and Chris Eldridge is a friend of mine, and I've had a chance to pick his brain a few times, gone to his place and be like, teach me anything. I just got so obsessed with that whole scene of music. So these last 10 years have been huge. The bluegrass, I guess the newgrass type stuff too. It's the perfect blend of song serving, songwriting, and playing proficiency. You know, it's not guitar music, it's not mandolin music, it's not like ripping music, but it is, but it's not. It's like this beautiful blend of all those things where it's not too much of the other.
It's just good music, you know.
Just good music. And the singing, man, the
harmony.
All the harmonies, the singing with no vibrato. It's a trip, man. It's a whole different thing. So that's been huge on me too. That has nothing to do with slide, of course, but music is music. Honestly, genres don't mean shit. You know, jazz can influence you if you're a rocker. Bluegrass can influence you if you're a country singer. Obviously, I guess that's enough. Electronic music can influence rock music. You know, I've been listening to Billie Eilish the last year. I'm obsessed with her. She had a huge influence on this new album. It sounds like this new album sounds nothing like Billie Eilish, is my point. But I was heavily influenced by so much of her. And I think people it's really important to branch up. Because music is music. When we get caught up in genres, we forget the purity of what's happening. You know, harmony is the same in any genre.
It's like getting caught up in the semantics of being so scoped in.
Versus
just like stepping back and being like, yeah, this is good or this is bad. You know, I like it or I don't like it. And then going about my day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So speaking of that,
I needed to get that out.
No, I love it. That right there is just a trip through that little timeline is it's an insight to why you have big ears. You know, that's my term I always say. When somebody's like, when you're jamming with somebody, they've either got big ears or they don't. You know what I mean? And I've so often, you know, at our NAM jams or on stage big jams or watching you respond to something that Josh did in a solo, like the ears are on. And I think the only way you can have ears that big when you're on stage, under the gun, behind the microphone in the studio, the only time you can have that kind of ear that big is if in life your musical diet is feeding those ears all these different things.
Oh, dude.
Right?
100%. You can't be closed-minded because everything has an impact. Our mind is made up of all these walls, right? And for music, we don't even scrape the surface on a lot of these different pathways. And listening to as much music, being involved in as many different scenarios as you can, opens those walls, breaks them open. I'm also fortunate.
And jamming with players, like, I would love to watch you jam with Chris Eldridge, because Chris, for those that don't know, Eldridge is from the school of the Brian Sutton, Tony Rice kind of background of playing.
Yeah.
And you are not from that background of playing. So
not at all.
You guys jam together. I would love to see, you know, as a fan of music, like that's the kind of thing that I look to listen to. And also as a player, that's the thing that I would look to improve my own playing is sitting down with something that's alien to what I do.
Yeah.
You know, and
He's really interesting. You know what? I don't know if you know this, but he told me that because like you watch him play, and I don't know that I've ever seen anyone with better technique. At least like he has got the technique down for that flat picking, and his left hand technique is so on.
yeah,
He is not omitting that pinky ever. You know, it's just perfectly always symmetrical. He told me that when he started playing guitar, he was like into Eric Johnson and playing electric.
I believe it.
And then he got the bug of Tony Rice and all those guys, and he just never looked back. It's like
Yeah.
you find your thing, you find that thing, and boom, you are forward. And I remember the last time we jammed, this was like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and he played me the early demos of him and Julian Lodge's first EP, whatever. And it was like to me, I was like, you know what? Those two guys, that's the best pairing I've ever heard of. You couldn't have two separate but together musical minds going on, and that's what makes music interesting is variation.
Sure.
But like the same goal in mind, and the same, like you were saying, both two guys with huge ears who are listening and they're not even playing guitar. The way I always think, I'm always telling people, you know, don't even play guitar, play music.
Yeah.
The guitar is your tool, right?
Yeah.
And these guys are just transcending through the guitar, and they're
so
just hearing.
And so many grass guys and acoustic guys.
Yeah.
They're multi-instrumentalists. You know, most guys that great banjo player, they probably didn't start on banjo. Great guitar player, probably, you know, so on and so forth. You know, that's
you.
Gosh. Stop. That's this whole thing. So with that said, I don't want to run out of time. We did something fun when I had Mark on here. One of the things that I found interesting is when we as players are put into any kind of advanced scenario where you've got tough chord changes or a tough time signature or anything like that, obviously that's already helping you along in your improvisation. Let's take a complicated tune, a Bill Evans tune, or a Chick Corea tune. There's so many changes that if you nail the changes, you're already kind of playing cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you're nailing the changes, you're kind of, okay, the flip side of that, and something that gets looked down its nose at a lot of time, it's like the Allman Brothers thing, where they play for 30-something bars over one chord or one riff, or one vamp, right? And making it interesting. So I had Mark, I said, hey, Mark, can you just play something in A7? And he said, what do you want me to play? I was like, here's your harmony, A7, B Mark. So I would love for you, just any chord that you want to do, what would make you vibe? If you just give us a time signature, you can pick the time signature, I'm not even going to clap, and just give us something over one chord that would make you feel like you're vamping and playing like you, man. Like, I don't think you need a bunch of changes. I mean, pick any time signature, like one chord, and then talk us through what it means to start from nothing. Literally, you're starting with no ground. I didn't give you any heads up on this.
Yeah.
You're going to sit down and play, and you tell us the chord, you give us the time signature before you start playing, and walk us through ground zero to a riff.
Yeah, well, always the way I'm thinking about when it's my moment of any kind, you know, like so many others do, it's not like I created this, but it's what I stand by. You got to tell a story. I want to, before we bring harmony, before we bring melody, before we bring motifs or themes, it's like I want to think of a story arc. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, introduction. Part 2 is like some conflict, or you know, our hero, or I don't know why I say hero, like a lot of action movies, I guess, but our protagonist has getting beaten down, has some conflict, and then Act 3 is where you send it home, and it's our climax, it's our big finish, and ties it all in a bow. So however that is, you know, I just want to get there, and I want to make whoever's listening feel like it's a journey. So I mean, let's say D, okay? This looks like a D, but we're in D.
Yes, again, one more time to our Woodshed viewers, Ariel is tuned down, and so it'll look like he's playing in G, am I correct?
Yep.
And he's actually playing in concert D. So he's tuning up. That's just a little heads up when you're looking at the fingers here.
Yeah. But yeah, let's say, if it was like a 6/8 thing,
Okay,
let's switch it up,
I love it.
And I my, if anyone had I don't have a grid or a template or a
Oh,
default to what I go to, but I kind of do. I think of everything in a major scale. I try to hear, how like Pat Martino thinks of everything in a minor scale.
mm-hmm.
I try to think of everything in major, even if it's in a minor thing. Like that's how I view music, because every note, every interval is either in a major scale or just a step away from it. So that's kind of how I visualize things. So if I'm just playing over one chord, can you hear me if I'm talking at the same time?
Yeah, yeah. It helps. Yeah, I can hear you, but it is
Okay.
helpful if you play and talk and then play.
Okay. So okay, another thing. Uh, I think playing over one chord is a gift. People get so caught up when, oh, it's so boring. You want me to just, and obviously everyone has a different style of playing. Playing over one chord is an open blank canvas for you to do.
It's a clear palette, and it's also at any level of playing the guitar. It's something we can all understand, and that's why
Yeah,
I love to ask. This happened by accident on Mark's episode, and now I'm going to start implementing it
you
because
should. This is great.
yeah, right.
I love
So when you even start your melody, please come back to that melody. It was like a 1 up to a 3,
it.
like
Yeah.
the intro, right? So walk us through what you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm already trying. I'm trying to think of not a hook, but a theme, right? So.
Yeah.
So okay. This is just an example, right? It'd be different every time, but
Yeah.
so a super simple melody that hopefully a listener can just digest easily. You don't have to think about it. You just, oh yeah. We're talking about all this bluegrass, so I'm thinking about more trad type of stuff, right?
Love it. I love it.
And when you have a blank canvas like that, to me, the way my brain works, I want to sometimes split into two ways. So I hear, yeah,
That's like I
yeah,
hear those thirds, and it's like, man, the song's already kind of rolling around.
yeah. But I also might want to hear, you do that a couple times. You're like, okay, now we can't just say the same thing over and over. We can come back to that.
You got to
What
get Act
happened?
Two, like you said. Like you said, I'm waiting on
Sure.
Act Two. Yeah.
Act two. So maybe Act two, sorry.
Yeah.
1/5.
Little two major.
Yeah. Full minor.
Yeah.
So I want to think about different chord variations you can put over these things too, because harmony, more importantly than melody, is like what you're playing under it too. And it's not something I always do, but it's really interesting to me when you can implement just inversions and different chord changes over. And when you have a blank canvas, like one chord, it allows you to say so much more with so little. Yeah, sure, I could just play like. So there's a lot of just one, but if you start really implement.
Yeah.
Whatever, and So I'm a big user of like, those are obviously chords I use. I love. Stuff like that. I love movement. So I would just try to go for something interesting chordal, and you know, the acts can be different approaches. So like act one could be maybe a more chordal thing, like what I was just doing. Act two could be more centered around like single note melodic movement, and then at the end, you know, we just, to me.
So let's say, hey, before you take for granted, don't take for granted the ending. If let's aim this conversation at the guy that's just getting into songwriting, right?
Okay.
So when you think about Act Three, one of the things that I know what you're going to do because I love your playing, right? Act Three is that resolution. So
Yeah.
what does it mean to resolve something? Let's say you've got the opening melody, the opening riff, and then the single note lines that you might even dive into some chromaticism.
Yeah.
And then when you come back to resolve at the end, what is it that you look for that brings that levity as a songwriter specifically?
For me, it's dynamics. And, you know, maybe if we're starting with this idea, you know, we could say all this stuff, act one, act two, act three. At the end, if you just bring it. The biggest thing, though, that's just wanting. Dynamics are everything. There's three things I find that people always respond to in music. They respond to when someone sings really high, right? People respond to when you play really fast. And the one that people don't realize is they react when you take something from nothing and you build it up with volume and intensity up to somewhere, and then you bring it back down, you BB King it at the end, people just don't even know what hit them.
Yeah.
So you could be using 3 notes. I could take this whole act story arc idea with 3 notes only, and with dynamics and intensity and articulation and the attention to all these details that are really what separate, in my opinion, music and like playing an instrument.
Yeah.
People, like, I feel like people really react to that. I know I do. That's what moves me to tears. Like when obviously feel and perfect articulation, but like dynamics takes you on a ride. Yeah. So that would be my answer, actually.
I love that, man. So that's a great segue here. Last couple of questions, man. What amp is really floating your boat these days? You know what I mean? It's like when you got to pick one, you don't know where you're going, you don't know what the gig is. A would just cause you to come down to Tennessee to do some guitar picking. What amp floats your boat? You know what pedal this? You know, you don't have to be your favorite pedal of all time. No pressure. What's your newest pedal that you're like, oh man, this is cool. Like you guys should check this out.
Okay, so for amp, I'm always playing the 2 rocks if I can.
Which model specifically?
I have the traditional clean. They're all great though, you know. And if I'm coming to Nashville, I'm calling a buddy or someone that has one. And if it's not the same model, I don't care as long as it's one of those. And the reason is, you know, when I'm doing a lot of the drop tuning, especially, I need an amp with that headroom. The way I run things is I always have a pedal on and I'm using my volume on the guitar. I'm never really full volume. So like, you know, this is my signature pedal. This is the Broadcast. So this is just volume up with that pedal. It's like very low gain right now. If I turn down, I'm clean. I'm sorry, I'm kind of out of tune here.
Who makes the pedal?
Hudson Electronics out in the UK.
Cool.
Check it out, Broadcast AP. But for example, like I want to control all my dynamics in my headroom over here. Okay. I don't want to be toe tapping that much, and I don't want to compress my sound.
And your effects, everything's right there, yeah.
Dude, yeah, and the tone as well. Like, yeah. I love this kind of stuff where you're first of all, I mean, you got the volume knob, but the tone knob too. I mean, I know like Greg Koch does that great. It's like the Danny Gatton type stuff.
I love it.
Love that stuff. There's so much in the guitar already that people don't even utilize. So the Two Rock, again, we're talking blank canvas, a lot of headroom, 50 to 100 watts of power. And that's just what I need. It doesn't mean that I need to be super loud. I just need that headroom. And I get that from those amps. So if I can't use an amp like that, any kind of Fender style amp will do the trick. As long as there's some reverb, that'd be nice. And, you know, even a deluxe, like a deluxe reverb does the trick, a super reverb, that's all good.
Yeah.
But that's what works for me. And it's taken me years. I've gone through so many different amps.
That's why it's a fun question.
Yeah, I love it. And you know what?
Years, it could be a different answer. That's what makes it fun, right? It's like, it's like once we as humans and we as guitar players, we as guitar lovers, get past the idea that we're searching for the flag at the end and realize that the best part of it is the evolution and the changing of flavors.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel so much more comfortable in my own skin knowing that, like, yeah, today I'm wearing this stuff and this, and like in 10 years, there could be an evolution somewhere from some other source of inspiration. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I could be a 5-string clawhammer banjo player in 10 years. It's unlikely, but it can happen. You know what I mean? It's like,
I could see it. I bet you already killed clawhammer Sal.
But it's like, that's the fun thing, is not looking at like, if I only get this one amp, my search is over. It's like, no, man, like this works for me right now, today.
Yeah. That being said, though, like if someone calls me, which most these days, all the session work they do is like, hey, we want you to do Ariel on this track. I go, okay. So I want to have my sound. I want to have that amp. Yep. If I'm just doing a session, or when I'm doing my records or anyone else's records, and I have a bunch of different amps at my disposal, I'll try anything out. Like you get different. I'm not just closed-minded about it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're chasing a certain sound or a vibe or a certain thing, you know, it's all about characteristics, and you do get different characteristics. I don't use Vox style amps because I'm purely a guy that I plug into a Vox and it just sounds like shit every time. I just don't have that. I don't know what it is. They don't like my hands, and I'm fine with that.
And it's cool. And
it's cool. I listen to guys that use Vox. I'm like, damn, I wish it sounded like that every time. But it's just a thing. Yeah. And I know what works for me.
I can't imagine a Tom Petty record without that Vox sound. You know what I mean?
100%.
But it's like, I'm like you. It's like every time I plug into a Vox, it's never the thing that like Brad Paisley can make it sound like I don't sound like when I play it.
Yeah.
Like I get, you know, a better tone on something that's not a Vox circuit, and it doesn't make Vox bad because look at all the amazing stuff it's done.
Dude, it's the sound of the Beatles. I mean, that's what I grew up. When I was doing a bunch of videos for Andertons a few years ago, we did a video on these new hand-wired Vox AC30s, and I was pretty nervous because I'm like, I sound like shit on these usually. And, you know, I grabbed a Gretsch. I grabbed like a Country Gentleman Junior or something like that. And we were playing Till There Was You or something like that. And I was trying to, or like the Day Tripper type of 62 to 65 Beatles era type stuff. And it was okay, but once we really turned it up, and it was just like, better put your earplugs in kind of loud in a small room like that.
Uh-huh.
That was the one time where I said, okay, I think I get it. Like, you just need to turn these up.
Be roaring, yeah.
Loud. Yeah. But it's just a sound, it's a thing, and that's the beauty of, I mean, that caps everything together with music. In this day and age with the internet, everyone thinks there's either a right way or a wrong way, and no one really thinks that there's endless ways, and there's no right or wrong way. It's so subjective to yourself, and you have to find that out for yourself, what you need to be you, and find that voice. And
what a perfect way, man! What a perfect bow! Like the whole episode, and just you know, you're just such a great. You're articulate in your speaking. The whole episode is just like being open-minded. You know what I mean? How do you find yourself? Go try it all, you know, and find out what it is. You'll find out where you lie. It was funny. I was asking Mark what he listened to, and he was like, I've been listening to like Periphery and stuff. He's like, I don't play like that, but I like listening to it. And I was like,
Yeah,
that's the thing, right? You don't
yeah,
have to only you don't look at the guitar playing and guitar as like, well, this is my favorite player. I'm gonna get the tattoo and only listen to him, and this is it, and only play and buy the
yeah.
things that he buys. It's like, it's like, is there validity? Like if somebody gets turned on to two rock or your pedal because of you, hey, home run, you help somebody on their
Of course,
journey,
of
right?
course.
That's the way I look at it. If somebody likes these, awesome, man. I
Yeah,
like these. They work for me. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's like, and the same thing. It's like a lot of telly purists. I'm a blasphemer because of what I've done to the heel joint. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But for
yeah.
me, I know what I want it to do, and I know what I want it to be, and I know what I want it to adjust things, right?
And that's the whole point of that.
The only way
Exactly.
you can get there, right, is
Yeah.
to go out and be open minded and hear it all and take it all in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Love it,
And
dude.
you know what? It is an honor if someone comes to a show or somewhere with this kind of guitar, a similar guitar like this, or another thing because they've seen me play it and it's tuned the same way, whatever. Like, it's flattering. Don't get me wrong. And if that, at the same time, it's like, do your thing, whatever that is. But if you see something that inspires you because you've seen or heard it, like that is equally as great. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you do as well, and I do. We all have our influences. They are what shape us as players and musicians.
Yeah.
But it's just as important to like leave them back at the door
Yeah.
after a while and like keep going on your own, so to speak.
It's crazy, right? And a lot of the things that I've found that really work for me, like Desert Island amps that I'll probably never get rid of. I got turned on to the Diesels because of Adam Jones. I don't sound like anything like a Tool record. That's not my style of playing. It's not. But I was like, oh man, he gets a great sound. I better go plug that thing in. And this works for me on my thing when I do it. You know what I mean? It's like
Wicked.
it's like just because like I wouldn't be surprised to see a shredder take your pedal and use it as a boost in front of a Marshall. It's like, okay, now
Me neither. Yeah, yeah.
boom, and then you're rocking.
Exactly.
So yeah, being open minded to all of our viewers out there on the internet. That's the thing, right? Go test all the flavors and run with the ones you like. And man, thanks for being on here and walking us through just the insight, of what you got and how you got to where you are as a player, and as an artist all together. You kind of have that resume, man. You've been the session guy, you've been the side man, now you're the artist. One more time on a little housekeeping. What are your links? What are your go-to links that people they got exposed to you? They want to check it out. Where can they get more?
arielposen.com or at Ariel Posen on everything that has an at before it.
Love it.
I respect you doing the YouTube thing, man. That's a full-time job when you do it with like that proper mindset. I tried doing this song series thing. I think I'm going to keep it going. But I am starting to post more on my YouTube as well, other than just, songs from my record or live performances. So check that out. But yeah, arielposen.com or at Ariel Posen. Come and say hi.
Yeah, the way to treat YouTube, man, is just make it not work. Like hanging out with you on our Sunday afternoon, man, this ain't working.
No, not at all.
This is good
Catch
time.
up.
So,
Good time.
Man, I can't thank you enough for being on here. And when they let the floodgates up, we're gonna do some more shows together for sure.
We have to. We were even talking about it in January. So I mean, it'll happen, man.
They let us back out. We get us a nice cure to this mess. Get everybody's heads right. And let's go play some live music, dude. We got to do it again.
Can't wait.
All right, brother.
Okay, man. Be well.
You too, my friend.